Recording. Thanks everyone for dialing in today. I think this is our fourth online supervision, which is very exciting. Can't wait to hear about everything that you've been up to. And just a reminder that the session's being recorded, and to do your best to de-identify any clients or families that you're talking about today. I'll be here in the background if you've got any technology issues. Otherwise, Suzanne will be taking us through today. I can see, Meg, that you've answered our first polling question around how many family sessions you've had since training. Thank you for that. And Uta, would you mind answering that one when you get the chance? That would be great. Over to you, Suzanne.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Thanks for joining us, Meg and Uta. I think we've only got the two of you on at the moment. As I said, I think Adam from Darwin and Gian might be joining us in the second half of this hour. So I wasn't sure today what people might want to focus on, whether it was particular case situations, having done some sessions, perhaps wanting to talk about those sessions, or if people would like to talk about the on-training component of the project, now that we're kind of up to looking at you guys being able to on-train to your staff around single session. So I'm not sure, did either of you come with anything in particular you wanted to cover today? Either you could put in the chat box or speak, that's fine.
Not particular. Can you hear me,
Yes?
Suzanne? Yeah,
Yeah.
because the microphone is on full blast.
No, that's
Doesn't
good,
get
I can hear
any
you.
louder. Okay, no.
Yeah.
I haven't had a session since the last one, just some exposure to parents, yeah, in sessions, but not a family therapy session as such.
Okay, yeah. And was there anything in particular be good to talk about today from your perspective?
I have to channel my thoughts. Give me some time to think. Yeah.
Yeah. No worries. We've had a public holiday here yesterday, so both Rachel and I were saying we're kind of, getting back into work mode today. So can
Okay.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
It sounds like Meg
Oh, yeah, no, I
is,
remember. I had a tricky one.
yeah.
Mm.
So
Do you want me
there's
to go?
one would be good to talk about.
Most likely, yes.
Yeah, no worries. That would be good. And just out of interest for your site, has there already been training, or is there thoughts around how you might proceed to train your colleagues? Single session?
Do you want me to answer or somebody else?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, Sally, I think Sally attended the last webinar with you guys.
Yep.
So Sally is our team leader, and she was going to organize the training sessions and the timetable and everything, but she's gone away for a week, so
Yep.
we haven't spoken since then.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't know where it's at.
So it
Some
sounds
of the
like there's
practitioners are excited.
oh, that's good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Have they been able to witness you or Sally do some sessions at all? Or?
No, not at all. No.
Yeah.
Just talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. You've obviously done a good job at getting people interested and excited, though.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. That's important readiness stuff. Is the is just having those conversations, sort of putting it out there, keeping it on the table, making it something people are interested in wanting to do.
Yeah, and making time for
Hi,
everybody.
sorry, it's Annie here. I've just dialed in because I didn't have any, sorry to interrupt, I didn't have any sound, so I've just dialed in. Is that okay? You hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Hi, Annie.
Hi,
Yep.
sorry, I was just letting you know I was joined.
No worries. We were just hearing from Uta about the plans for their training, but also she has one particular tricky case to talk about. Do others have anything that they would? particularly like to talk about in the hour we have today, either clinical particular case example or wanting to talk about the on-training and any questions you might have about doing that? Perhaps if
I don't have any case. Oh, sorry, I don't know how this works. Sorry, I'm just.
No, you go ahead, Annie. It's all right. We'll probably have to revert to
Oh,
the box, to the typing if we get too many more people, but that's okay for now. You go ahead, Annie.
okay. Sorry. Yeah, I don't have any cases, but I'd just be interested, I guess, to hear about the training. Dom and I are going to be meeting next week to start our planning for rolling out the training with our team here. So yeah, just anything that people are chatting about would be helpful. If anyone's got any experience of it so far, that's okay.
Okay. Yep. Right. And did you have any particular families that you've seen that you would like to talk about, or?
No, the last time I was on, I chatted about a family I had, and then I haven't had one since. I have offered it to a couple of clients, but not had them take it up yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure, has Meg been able to hear us? She couldn't hear before.
I think she's just jumped out of the room and jumped back in. I've given her the teleconference details, but yeah, we'll see if she's had any success.
That's all right. Well, we might start perhaps hearing from Usha around your family session that you said was quite tricky. So perhaps if you'd like to talk about that, Usha, and then we can, others can listen into that conversation.
Yeah, it was a mom and her 14-year-old daughter. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
You can?
Yeah.
Mom and a 14-year-old daughter walked in, so there was no appointment booked in crisis. And they want to do a simple little intake, but it ended up being a 2-hour session because the 14-year-old refused to go back home after conflict, pretty severe conflict with her mom during the week, and then on the weekend she spent time with her friend who said she could live there. Mom butted in and got her out and said we need to do something about it. The young one decided to come to Headspace and get some mediation happening, and so I got them in the session. Mom was very upset, probably a little bit of undiagnosed mental health issues, very talkative, wouldn't at all take a breath to let the daughter speak. I finally managed to get her, compliment her out of the door with a consent form in her hand and to get some time with the daughter on my own. And then the young one decided not to return home and was not at high risk or anything like that, not suicidal, no delivered self-harm, but refused to go home. So I tried to negotiate, tried to invite Mom back into the session, but it was so difficult because Mom wasn't able to listen to anything what the daughter said nor I said, that I ended up having to get the manager to help me make a decision. Yeah. And he struggled as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the end, after 1.5, 2 hours of negotiating and sort of discussing what the evening could look like with both of them, they agreed to leave together and go back into the family home. Yeah, and she booked in for an appointment, which was then cancelled a week later, but rebooked, rescheduled. And I think the daughter is coming this Thursday for an intake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. It's probably one of the more challenging scenarios, isn't it? No matter what technique or path you choose clinically, that's a difficult situation. I'm curious, from the position of a single session family consultation, what components of that model do you think you drew on in that session?
Or I tried to definitely aim to find a mutual agenda, and
Hmm.
we sort of ended up agreeing that it should be for the daughter's benefit to engage with Headspace because there has been some conflict going on, and they both agreed that they would like to improve there with each other, which was great. Yep.
Hmm.
So finding agenda.
Yeah. So
Then
that that notion of seeking an agenda gave you something to kind of aim for in amongst all the crisis and the chaos.
yeah.
You could actually try and find something that they both were able to agree would be useful for the young person that they engage in Headspace
Yeah.
services.
Yeah.
Mm,
So
yeah.
focusing back on, even though it was very difficult to have any dialogue with mom because she was venting non-stop, that agenda was agreed on. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. And in the end, you actually were able to get the young person, like the young person was willing to come back, mum was willing to let the young person come back and engage in services.
Yeah, as I said, the appointment was made for the same week with me, with a 14-year-old, but it got cancelled, I think, by mom because of work difficulties with her work schedule, and
Yeah.
then rescheduled. And now she's seeing another staff member. She's booked in for intake with another staff member, and we have to, of
Hmm.
course, prepare that staff member for that kind of case scenario because it could happen again. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you expect mum will attend the appointment?
Definitely. Yeah.
And is there a thought about how that might get managed, given what you know about mum's kind of inability to maybe hear or listen to session?
Yeah, we haven't made a time to brief the other staff member, but and Sally's gone on holiday, so I guess I get her this week, maybe today or tomorrow when she comes, and we'll have a little case discussion and identify the importance of the agenda item actually that it would be that these sessions and the engagement is for the benefit of the 14-year-old, not so much mom, but mom. So mom boundaries, I guess, we have to put some boundaries into place.
Yeah. Is there any thought that it could be useful to make sure there are two staff members available for this session?
No, unfortunately, that was the downfall. It got booked late in the afternoon when there's only one staff member
Mm.
here, and I was a bit worried about that because if she would need help from somebody else, which is high likelihood,
Yeah,
there may not be anybody available.
right. Mm. Because I
Actually, there will be
suppose,
somebody available for another 3/4 of an hour. So, but I guess
mm,
if she's briefed and she puts some thoughts into it and prepares herself well, she should be okay.
mm,
But
yeah.
I needed help.
Some,
I needed help during the session to get somebody else, and I got somebody else in.
yeah. There, I think, yeah, when you have sessions like that, there are, and I've had one very similar, um, with a mum that certainly had her own mental health issues. And to tell you the truth, it's been something I'm still reflecting on myself. Is I found it virtually impossible to have any conversation with a young person, and this mum clearly had some serious mental health issues happening for her. In this, and as an individual trying to run that session, I found it really difficult and ended up working quite hard to have mum agree to be out of the room for a bulk of the session, which is not generally how I work. Um, but it was because I really felt I could have no conversation with this young person. and interestingly now what's happened is, and I managed to have a few sessions like that and managed to talk with mum at the end and negotiate with her in the waiting room and that sort of thing. And the young person was quite engaged. But interestingly, mum has ensured that the young person's not going to come back to Headspace. She's not happy that she wasn't included in those sessions completely. She was quite paranoid about what might have been talked about. And yeah, and sort of my own reflection, I'm not sure whether I could have got anywhere having her much more engaged in the session, but it made me realise that it's whether I could or couldn't talk to the young person in the room with mum without really engaging and finding a way to work with mum. She's now ensured the young person's not getting a service at all. So
With this mom, she actually, I found her because I thought I need to include her for the benefit of her daughter. And for some strange reason, I have no idea how it works, but she is really friendly with me, and she is agreeing to facilitate the kind of intervention her daughter needs. So the outcome of that 2-hour session, walk-in session, not even planned, booked, was good in a way. Yeah, she was pleased with part of the of what the service she received.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, it might just be a structural thing to think about for your service, even not for that day, but whether, and I don't know whether there's capacity at your service to consider having 2 staff members potentially allocated, and even if that day you can't be present, if you have some rapport with mum, whether there's capacity for you to, in the background, be kind of there supporting mum, connecting with mum, so that somebody else can be doing some other work with the young person, and then sort of bringing that together with 2 staff members, because it sounds like it's going to be really difficult to move much forward on your own.
Yeah, I spoke to mum and I discussed her own sort of needs, and she assured me that she had made an appointment with a doctor and that she had an existing psychologist supporting her, and we sort of discussed that can go as a parallel sort of thing for her. And she agreed that that's necessary because she's going through a bit of a crisis with her daughter. Yeah, but
do you think there were other... Sorry.
A second staff member, it would be good to have a second one available, because I certainly needed some help with the decision making.
And is there were there other parts of single session sort of principles or part of the model that you thought was useful in this situation, that was quite impromptu by the sound of it? So the agenda setting sounds like it was quite a useful concept to have in mind. Were there other aspects, do you think? Or?
Yeah, I just lost the term. I have to find my folder. I have a folder.
I was wondering if the... Yeah, oh good. Things like... well, I was wondering about things like, was it useful to, with this mum and daughter, to be kind of constantly checking in? Was there sort of room to be able to do that, to kind of...
that was really difficult because mum lost track. She was incredible all over the shop, just drawing stuff in from herself. That was very hard with mum, but yeah. My phone is ringing at the same time. Sorry, I'm distracted because I'm on intake. Hopefully we'll stop soon.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, no, checking in was the worst. It's really hard with mum to address. Okay, go back to the original sort of agenda and the goals, and yeah.
So what would happen when you did sort of check in and say, are we... So you'd established the agenda was around help seeking for the young person and engagement with Headspace. Would you go back to that agenda and check in about that, or were you checking in that that was an okay agenda for her and she would then bring up other material? Or...
She was diverging straight away to other issues and her own issues mainly. But then when I sort of reminded her that it was we use servers and that we can address that family conflict and the communication and Claudia's issues. Oh no, is that the name? I wasn't gonna do that. She took that on board a little bit before she talked about her own issues again. Very quickly, within a few minutes.
Yeah. So it was very difficult to sort of have her redirected back to that family kind of conflict, communication issues.
Yeah.
Sounds like she had a lot of her own kind of concerns, her own.
Yeah, the
she obviously
solution, I think with the help of the other staff member, we managed to, the family found sort of in a way their own solution, because we did question them how they usually handle their conflict and what they could do to have a nice night together and going home, like doing a bit of role play sort of kind of stuff, and that seemed to work. That seemed to work, sort of basic kind of stuff, talking about basics. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you moved to harnessing the family's sort of resilience or own strengths by asking them what have they done before when they've been in this situation, how have they managed to negotiate these kind of difficult situations in the past.
Yeah, and they were both agreeing that they wanted to make a positive change and be a little bit more lenient with each other that night in particular. So it was a good outcome that they agreed to leave together and try to make the best out of the evening. And I guess that's why they're coming back as well.
Yes.
So in a way it was successful after 2 hours.
Yeah. And so how did the whole, because one of the notions in single session is this idea of making time your friend and being able to finish up or, draw attention to the fact that you've only got a certain amount of time. Was that at all possible in this situation, or?
Yeah, it was possible, and as I said, I managed to compliment Mom sort of in a way with a consent form out of the door after half an hour to get a chance to talk to her daughter on her own. So, but then the rest of the session was incredibly difficult because she was venting non-stop and didn't even take a breath, and we could hardly interrupt her. And when we tried to interrupt her, she was becoming unstable. Not necessarily angry, but unstable emotionally, and yeah, that's why it took so long. So sticking to a timeline was nearly impossible.
Yeah. It sounds like in what you were able to cover, and given it was a crisis situation, actually 2 hours was a reasonable, like it could have gone longer.
True.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not a typical, as you say, it wasn't a planned single session. There's been quite a lot of people talking about using the single session model, though, at that intake walk-in presentation, and some of the sites have been saying it's been more successful in that way. They found it more difficult with their longer-term clients to invite them in, and they've found that new clients, because I suppose they don't know any different and have just been offered that option, have taken it up more readily. So it is happening in a lot of sites that people are using it at an intake, but this was even not an intake, this was a crisis. So
it was a crisis, yeah, definitely. And the funny thing is also they presented again together a week and a half after that first appointment, not appointment, walk-in. They walked in again without having an appointment, and Mom requested to speak to me on her own. The daughter was there with her, and we sort of declined. We said, you've got an appointment, and I was busy anyhow, and I made a follow-up call that same day, an hour later on, to query what's been going on, and she said she just wanted to add some extra information, but it could have easily blown out of proportion again.
Yeah.
Because she had an existing appointment.
Mm. It sounds, do you feel like some of those techniques or principles behind single session were useful in that crisis situation?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, sort of trying to, as I said, trying to come on the same page, and identifying an agenda was really helpful, and that's more or less the only thing that I achieved. And then the follow-up call and checking in was difficult. Responding was possible because they left together, finding some of their own solutions. And
Yes.
they left fairly positive, which was great to initiate a positive change.
Yeah.
And then the closing after 2 hours went okay too. We made a follow-up appointment, and we, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it does sound like you're really able to, particularly that, and I was thinking in terms of just generally for people thinking about the on-training, when you on-train your staff, and think about what components of the training are so crucial for people to really get their head around and practice. Your colleagues get an opportunity to practice, and I think this is such a great example of how important that concept around setting an agenda is. And no matter whether you do really a big lead-up preparation, ring all the family members prior and have and set it up in that way, or whether you do it on the spot like you were forced to, I think the skill in seeking an agenda and setting an agenda with all those people present is such a crucial part of this model and such a crucial skill. So when you think of on training your colleagues in single session, I think it's a very important step for people to practice, to have some role play practice, get them to say it out loud, get them to think about the ways, the questions people will can be asking family members and young people in order to gain a sense of what will be most important to cover today, trying to find a shared agenda, and that, as you said, if you don't get anything else achieved in a session, particularly really hard sessions, actually coming to some agreement between very parties that are really in high conflict can be very that is success for some family sessions, is to actually come to some agreement. Particularly, like, I like that example that, what you came to some agreement between mum and the 14-year-old was that it was important the 14-year-old get a service from Headspace, and that this was something agreed upon. And I could see that being an agenda that you could come back to with mum, and it could be the agenda that helps you to separate for part of the session, because that is in line with the agenda that mum's agreed with, that the young person needs to be engaged, needs to have a service. So, it's such an important part of the whole model. So I just encourage you to think about in your on training that you really do make sure you spend enough time on that part. It can seem really simple, but I think it's quite, as you have perhaps experienced yourselves setting up sessions, it's not as easy as it looks sometimes, and getting people to practice it, do role plays when you're doing the on training, I just think it's really crucial. I don't know what others think. Not sure, Uta, in your situation, whether you'd agree with that that was kind of a
I
crucial thing,
agree.
or
I agree, and also um, referring to that agenda again. I guess that's what you
yeah,
mean by checking into, yeah, to because mom lost herself in the conversation, venting
yes,
all the time, going back to that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it might be something you can use to when you are briefing your colleague that's going to see this family next, make ensuring that they understand that was an agreed agenda and how they might be able to use that work that you did in that last session to support them in the next session. Um, to put some structure and boundaries
That's
that
a good
this is something
point.
they can come
Yeah,
back to. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's a good point.
I'm not sure if, but it really, yeah, it's such a great example, and I hope it's an example you can use when you are training your colleagues. These wonderful examples, like what you've just given then, Uta, will be so helpful for your colleagues to hear about the varying ways that you can use single session family consultation, but also um, a really great example around why it's worth spending however long it might take to actually establish an agenda. So take those great examples into your on training, because that's what will bring it alive. And it was certainly the feedback we got as trainers from lots of all of you guys at the champion trainings, was that having examples, of having real case examples brought up to illustrate points, was one of the more useful things people found in the training. So your colleagues will equally find it great to hear examples from your experience. So I'd really encourage you to think about those before you do your on training, and bring them into the training.
Yep. So that you're semi-prepared when you are entering a session like this, unprepared. You still have some
Yes,
tools in the back of your head.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And in some ways, it's a really good example of just bringing it back to the bare bones, and not trying to do too much, because it's actually unrealistic that you were going to, in that time, resolve the major communication issues, resolve mum's mental health concerns, resolve, all of those things that were being presented to you were not going to be possible to be dealt with. Um, actually going to the bare bones and getting clear about a single agenda that was achievable was a really, was a fantastic step to take, and I think gave you, and it gave the family and the young person an experience of success. It was possible to resolve something. It was possible to have some level of success in that chaos crisis.
Yeah, and they both agreed to it, which surprised me a little bit because 14-year-old was very determined not to go home. But then they negotiated and they agreed both that it's possible to do that. That
Yeah,
was good. Yeah, that was good to see, and I think they were both happy with that outcome.
yeah, yeah. Yes, I think absolutely that was successful. Um, and it's about keeping realistic about what you can achieve in that time. And if the message out of this for that family, for both the young person and the parent, was that Headspace is a place where we can actually be heard. We could both be heard. We actually could experience some success in a very difficult situation, and this worker was able to help us with that. We might come back. This is a place we could come back to when things are difficult, and that's success.
Yeah.
They've not given up.
Yeah, however, then in particular with that mom, you didn't want to facilitate the crisis support. You didn't want to emphasize on that too much because it wasn't a matter of high risk or anything, but you don't really want anybody like this walking through the door every
No,
week.
no, no.
But I agree with what you say. And
Yeah.
therefore, when I made the phone call, I sort of reflected with her on her own resources, what she can use, you know, to do the same thing as her daughter. Yeah.
Yes.
But with a different organization. Yeah, I think she got that.
Yeah.
Hopefully she got it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I don't know if other people who are dialed in would like to make a comment, or either in the chat box, or if you'd like to be able to respond to speak about perhaps anything that kind of rung a bell for you in listening to Uta's presentation. Perhaps there's been something you've experienced, or it's reminded you of something, or there's some feedback you'd like to provide in listening to Uta's presentation. So perhaps I'll give people just a minute. I can see Meg's writing something, and Annie's also typing. So perhaps we'll just see some feedback there. Does that feel all right to leave it there, Uta?
Yes, it does. No, it was helpful. I've taken on board what you said. Yeah. And I'll give you feedback the next time when we speak what happened.
Yeah, I'd love to hear. That would be great. Yeah. I've just seen that Meg has put up that she's completed 5 single sessions to date, and that they find the clients cancel the follow-up sessions. So maybe, Meg, have you got a microphone? Are you able to speak? No, sorry. Could you say something about what you think, like, have you been able to find out why the clients are cancelling? See, Meg's typing busily. It's difficult if you can't speak. Yeah. And Annie's typing as well. They cancel last minute, often stating another commitment has come up rather than not wanting to actively follow. Have you got your own theory, Meg, about this? Then we often don't have any luck contacting them to get feedback. I'm just wondering, do you have, a theory yourself around this, in the absence of any specific feedback? And he's also put up, maybe they feel that one session has been enough, i.e. they see change and don't see the point in another session. And Meg's wondering, did they find it too challenging? Yeah, I think both of those possibilities occurred to me. Is it that people feel like things are not, maybe they're not all fixed? I mean, I don't know if it's in your experience as well, but certainly my experience, lots of people, because coming together as a family and having these conversations can be quite challenging and difficult, but also logistically can be difficult. Sometimes things have to be bad enough, or they have to be in a crisis for people to engage in this work. And maybe, having had the single session, things are no longer quite bad enough. They're not in crisis. Things are resolved enough that people feel they can get on with their lives. And so whilst there may be still significant other issues to deal with, I wonder if sometimes it's not critical enough or a crisis enough, and the logistics of getting together is so challenging. Meg's got, I've received some feedback and they report improvement in the short term, but that change is not maintained. Being in crisis makes sense. The one family I'm thinking of is not at that point. Yeah. I think, yeah, I don't know. I think, unfortunately, all of us human beings seem to be most motivated when things are bad enough, when things reach that crisis point. And when they aren't at that point, people weighing up the effort involved in actually doing the work or getting a whole family together, getting everybody to come in, is not quite outweighing the problem or the crisis, the situation going on. So I'm wondering if that could be a significant factor, that you've actually done enough work with people that, yeah, it's kind of taken the edge off and people are managing. Yeah, so maybe thinking maybe that could be the case. I don't know. Have other people who are here, I see others are typing, have other people had this experience where the follow-ups are not being taken up? That people do the initial session but they don't do a follow-up? Putting feelings and impressions into words can be difficult. Are you meaning, Uta, for Meg to type, or are you meaning for the families to come in, that it can be quite difficult?
For the families, I think over the phone, often clients tell me that they are relieved when they hear that they get a face-to-face session instead of over the phone. Especially anxious clients who have trouble putting strong emotions into and feelings into words. So maybe with the feedback over the phone, it's because we give them an opportunity to express themselves. It puts a lot of pressure on the individual to, from a European point of view, and speaking a second language, I know how that can feel.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yep. So you're wondering if the follow-up is over the phone, that might be off-putting or difficult for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, difficult. Just like you've got to put thoughts into your sentences, and you've got to put thoughts into what you say, and it's difficult. It can be difficult for people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder, have others had the experience of perhaps clients describing a short-term improvement in the situation at home, but that this doesn't seem to be maintained over any length of time? Or have other people had that experience? I see Annie has said that she's found that's, yes, what you were talking about, Ilta, around putting feelings, impressions into words as a factor for getting young people to agree, that it's got to be sort of bad enough for them to want to have the whole family in, or it's just seen as too difficult. I think this is where it's also our it's that weighing up, isn't it, when you're setting setting an agenda or looking at readiness for a session, is really looking at motivation of the whole family and the young person being able to weigh up, maybe initially in individual work with you, that where they see the main issues laying, where they see if it's particularly around conflict at home, and I suppose weighing up, is this something that's causing enough significant problem or issue in their life that it's worth doing the work to resolve that. And I think if people aren't quite at that point, and it's us that are much more seeing this as problematic for their lives, then we don't always get quite the buy-in that we think we should have. And that maybe is when, I don't know, sometimes I reflect back and think the person working hardest here seems to be me, and I'm not actually even in this family. And yet I seem to be the one that's bringing the energy, bringing the kind of reframing, really trying to see the point to all of this happening here today. And I think I wonder sometimes whether, unless that energy can really sit with the family and the young person, then maybe that makes it difficult to get that ongoing buy-in, or ongoing change, because a lot of that's energy is sitting with us, and we don't actually live in that family. We're not going home with them. We're not. So the buy-in really does have to be with the family and the young person, which again is where I think that readiness, setting agenda, is so crucial, because if you've got that, and if they really are seeing the absolute benefit to their lives of having those sessions, of doing that hard work, then they are likely to do the work at home. They are likely to come back and want to continue to engage if that's needed. I'm not sure if that makes sense to others. I'm just going to read some of the other comments people. Meg said, yeah, it does. I'm just looking what else Meg has said. I found phone follow-up to be okay, and clients are happy to discuss. I think the cancellations of subsequent appointments are more about the practicalities of getting everyone also not in crisis. I would agree. Left to their own devices, families resort to past behaviour so easily. Excuse bad stuff. Yeah. And I think what is the natural path for all of us is the things we've done most of, the things that, at a neurological level, we've laid down the pathways over and over again around particular habits, particular ways of being. And I think families have patterns of behaving that they've perhaps been doing for a really long time. And when they go into crisis, or they're really challenged, it is much more likely they're going to go back to those previous patterns of behaviour, unless, much like when we work with individuals, perhaps using CBT kind of principles, where we're having people to increase their awareness of their behaviours, their thinking that might have them responding with old patterns, old behaviours. I think much the same thing is the case with families. We have to have an increased awareness of families, of old patterns, of ways of interacting, of automatic responses, so that they can actually be starting to pull themselves up around that if they decide that's problematic and they don't want to do it anymore. So perhaps that's something, keeping in mind with families is raising that with them towards the end of sessions, that much like we do with individuals, you might find yourself going back to old patterns even though you're aware you want to do something different, and we've talked about doing something different today. You might want to keep an eye out for those old patterns, those old habits. Just take note of it, just notice it. Perhaps that's a useful thing to bring in towards the end of sessions if you're finding lots of people are feeling like they're going back to the old patterns very quickly and they're not sustaining change. Yep.
I also
Annie,
think that the family has to be courageous to come to family therapy session, because it can be intimidating to
Yes.
there's a semi-stranger listening to intimate details about the family dynamic. So it requires courage and a little bit of faith as well, that
Yes.
session could have a good outcome.
Yeah. Yes. And I think even if people don't come back for that follow-up, or feels like some things go backwards, I always say to people, either individuals or families, you can't take away that they've had an experience of something different. So even if it doesn't appear to be lasting, that brief period or that time in that session where they actually got to hear each other without shouting or putting each other down, or that was noticed to be different, can't be taken away that actually happened. It kind of shows something about a capacity that can be drawn on, whether the sessions down the track happen in 6 months or a year's time, or that perhaps the only follow-up you can have is in the form of a letter. And that might be something else to think about, is if you don't get to see a family again, or they seem to cancel a lot, and you feel like there's a lot of unsaid stuff in your head, I often resort to writing a letter, and I suppose you don't always know how people will take it or read it, but I will often write a bit of a therapeutic letter that perhaps takes those thoughts I've got in my head around perhaps the things you noticed in the session about the family, particularly the strengths, the things that you noticed they were able to do for that time in the session. If, for example, they came to the session saying, we're in high conflict all the time, we're always putting each other down, yelling at each other, sometimes it gets violent, da-da-da, and they have an hour with you in which you actually witness something completely different, where they're actually able to take turns, listen to each other, make a decision about something that they all agree to. Even putting that in a letter and saying that you witnessed them do that, and that you could see they had that ability to hear each other, and literally speak from that example, can be quite powerful for people who feel really problem saturated, that their whole life feels like nothing ever changes, nothing can be improved. And I do know from some really, really stuck families I've seen in the past who still remain in quite a lot of difficulty, sending a letter like that did make an impact. I know there was one particular mum who just said to us that no one had ever said she did anything good as a parent. She only gets criticised. She gets criticised from Families SA, from schools. The only call she gets from schools is because the kids are in trouble. So to actually have a letter that said, we witnessed something in that session around the way she was managed to contain some quite abusive behaviour with her team, that she herself didn't become abusive but actually managed to contain her child, and we were able to give that example back to her in a letter, was quite powerful for her, and perhaps hasn't changed her life as such, but for her, she put it on her fridge. She told us she actually put that on her fridge as something that is a reminder that maybe she's not all bad and she's not 100% bad parent. She can do some things well. So, yeah, maybe that's something to think about for those families that you're left kind of wondering what's happened, or you're left with a whole bunch of thoughts in your head. I suppose taking up the single session principle, if you can't, if you may never see those people again, and there's things running around in your head that you wished you could say to those families or those young people, perhaps think about whether putting it in a letter and being able to say it could be helpful, rather than it being in your notes or in your head or presented at a case presentation, but the family or the client never get to hear it. Think about whether it might be useful to put it in as a therapeutic letter. There is some good articles about therapeutic letter writing. I don't know if anyone's seen articles about it, but I'm happy to send some articles around if you're keen to read any more about therapeutic letters to families. See, there's people writing. Is there anything others want to add? I know we're about to finish. Was there any more people wanted to add or ask about? Make comment. Meg has said, thinking about it in terms of crisis has helped me to better understand where the family might be coming from. Yeah. Yeah. And thanks, I think having Uta's presentation at the beginning and talking about a crisis presentation, is actually we've come full circle, and perhaps, it's really helped us think about what does often bring people to something as challenging, as difficult, as getting a whole family in a room together, having some difficult conversations when things aren't going well, was perhaps a really great case example to help us think about. That is often the context, even if they're planned sessions, they're often in the context of things being particularly difficult, probably in some level of crisis, and that's what's having somebody come in. And yes, sometimes a session that you do may be just enough to move from that crisis. And for some families, that is good enough, or it is all that they can tolerate for that period of time. And what you might experience, and we certainly do at Murray Bridge, is that people come back sometimes 6 months later. So whilst they don't come back straight away, they decide 6 months down the track, when maybe something is bad enough again, that they'll come back because they've had a good experience one other time. And I think for some families that is the path of how they access services. Is there just before we finish, is there anything else? Thank you from Meg. Anything from Annie or Uta that you'd like to add? Or
No, thanks for the feedback. That was great, helpful.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for presenting.
Thank you.
And a great job, yeah. Really tricky. Yeah.
Thanks.
Just see the last few bits of typing. I think Annie's just writing something. Thank you. We are starting our training here soon, so I can feedback next time. That would be great to hear. And don't forget all your great examples of all your great work. Take it into your training, because I know your colleagues will. That's how they'll remember the theoretical or the how-to stuff. They'll remember it from your examples, so it brings it much more alive. So take all your great examples of all your work into your training. Thank you for your help. Have to leave. Have a happy day. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you. I think our next training will be in May. Thank you.
Yes, before everyone leaves, if you wouldn't mind answering a couple of polling questions, these are just on the screen now. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. You've been busy. You've put all these questions up.
Yeah, just in the background, Angela, our evaluation person, said, what a great idea. Let's ask people how they found the supervision and, if they were able to work on what they wanted. And, yeah, it's good to get this feedback. Otherwise, we kind of just go off our gut feeling. So, yeah. And for those answering, just letting you know they are all anonymous. So, yeah, please be honest. And it will definitely help us,
definitely.
Yeah, running these.
Yeah, because this medium of supervision, it's tricky to know actually
Exactly right.
How it's going. Yeah.
And also, I'm finding a lot of people are dialing in. There might be 2 or 3 champions in the room, and we don't know. I think Meg has a couple of people in the room with her, and so it's good to get that feedback as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
All right, I think that is everything. So we are catching up again in probably an hour, aren't we, Suzanne?
So 3 o'clock my time, 3:30 yours, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So we've got time for lunch, and I'll see you back here very shortly.
Yeah, no worries. See you, Rachel.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.